everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts. Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you. We are broadcasting from General Flynn Studios here in Venice, Florida. Happy to have you with us today. And it is an honor, folks, to welcome my guest to the show this weekend, Congressman Louie Gohmert. Welcome to Schaftlein Report. So happy to have you with us today. So, Louie, you just came back from Israel. You were on a trip to the Middle East. Can you share with our viewers firsthand experiences, what you saw, and let's sort of break it down versus the media reports we get in this country, what's really happening?
Yeah, I read a story that while I was there, Jerusalem Day occurred. That's a celebration of the victory from the 1967 Six-Day War when Israel was completely surrounded, outnumbered, and yet they came out victorious in only 6 days and acquired more of their heritage, the promised land, through the process. And that included Gaza and Sinai and so much that the West put pressure on them to give to the Palestinians. And if you go back to 2005, it was the United States largely putting tremendous pressure on Israel. Look, we know there's no deal, but why don't you just unilaterally give away the Gaza Strip? There were Israeli Jewish greenhouses, massive greenhouses. There were plants making products, manufacturing, all kinds of commercial businesses going on. And when Israel thought, okay, they bought into what the West was telling them, you just give away this land, and it's unilateral action. Of course, you're not getting anything in return, but the whole world will see finally that you're the ones that want peace, that you're the ones that are really trying to work things out. And as I had told President Netanyahu back many years ago after he came back into and he was not prime minister in 2005 when that was given away. But, there has never been a time when Israel has given away land trying to buy peace that land wasn't used as a staging area from which to attack it. And that's been the case. When Israel takes these unilateral actions, like some people have said, well, it wasn't true of Sinai. Where do they think most of the weapons have been coming from? President El-Sisi told me years ago that after he took over as president of Egypt, that when they started going into Sinai trying to clean it up, there were more weapons per person than probably anywhere in the world. So those things have come back to haunt Israel. No matter what they do unilaterally, it's not taken as a great act of peace. It's taken as, okay, well, now what are you going to give us? Now what are you going to give us? And until we stop in the United States paying to help educate Palestinian children to hate Jews, to want to kill Jews, because they're being taught that, then you're not going to have peace, and it's not going to work things out. And I know that President Freudian slip, President Biden has been assuring the Palestinians, we're going to get this worked out. He's been assuring Saudi Arabia that, look, we're about to work out a peace deal with Israel and stop the fighting. We're going to work this out, and we want you, Saudi Arabia, involved. That's what the media has been reporting. But the fact is, the Hamas is not going to reach a deal. They may agree to some deals, kind of reminds me of North Korea when Clinton and his Madeleine Albright, Wendy Sherman, they were negotiating a deal with North Korea. And they said, look, if you'll just promise us in writing that you will not use what we give you to make nukes, we'll basically assure you get everything you need to make nukes. You just promise you won't use it for nukes. And can you imagine, they're
Oh,
going, what? You'll give us everything we need for nukes if we just sign a deal saying we won't make nukes with it? Oh, well, yeah. You show us, you want me to sign here initially? You just show me, I'll sign whatever it is. And naturally, they took what they got and they made nuclear weapons. And the same kind of deal with Iran. Oh, you just want us to sign this? And by the way, Mark, there were a few of us that went over to Vienna to meet with the International Atomic Energy Association agencies. Their two top investigators, inspectors that were going into Iran to make sure that they were not getting nukes. And I was going, how in the world can you certify that they're not using cyclotrons and just spinning this whole thing to get what they need to make nuclear weapons? Because you haven't even been into the underground military spots where they're actually doing the work. And they said, well, that's true, but they gave us videos of what they were doing down there. And according to the videos, they're not violating the agreement at all. Can you imagine, Mark? I mean, these are supposed to be
Louis,
smart people.
Louis, I look at what we did under President Trump and how he treated the Iranians, how he was welcomed by the Saudis. Remember, his first official trip in office was to go to Saudi Arabia. They gave him a king's welcome in Saudi Arabia, the red carpet, the swords, everything. And now I look and see what is happening now. Short time later, we have Secretary Blinken strong arming Israel. There's no better way to put it than he's trying to twist their arms. He's using the
Well,
leftist media.
Mark, that may be understating what they're doing. When you say strong arming, from what I gathered, it's a whole lot worse than strong arming. The pressure they're putting on Israel. We're going to leave them defenseless. They won't have the weapons they need. They better get on board, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's terrible. And let me ask you, Louis, is it because of political pressure in this country with leftists in Michigan, Wisconsin? Is it all about the election why Biden is doing this because he's losing support from his left? Because it seems to me, remember when all the college protests were going on literally less than about a month ago? You saw them, these just mush-headed idiots who were taking as liberal positions. I saw it. I went to literally protest University of California, Irvine. I saw it. I saw the helicopters hovering overhead. Hell, I was on the phone with General Flynn. He goes, what's that noise in the background? I said, I think they're breaking it up tonight, General. There's 5 helicopters, 100 paddy wagons, and 200 police here. But Louis, what do you make of this? Is it because of what's happening? Biden's behind in the polls, that the pressure coming from the left is causing him and Blinken to effectively abandon our only ally in that section of the world?
Yeah. And, let's face it, this administration has not been a great ally for Israel. And you go back to Trump, Trump is amazing. He really is amazing. But if you were to say, okay, Mark, there's going to be a president one president between Truman and Biden who will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, probably people wouldn't have picked Trump. But of course, Trump recognized it. He said, we've been saying for decades we were going to recognize Jerusalem, so I'm going to do it. And he did. And of course, I know you're plugged in. You understand. The left was saying, it's going to start World War III by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital. That's going to be the end. It's going to just explode. And there really wasn't much that went on after that. I know you recall.
No, it was calm. And, the other thing Trump said was, when I was president, we didn't have a war in the Middle East. We didn't have Russia attacking Ukraine. And yet here the Biden administration, again, Louis, I want you to expand on it. The pressure that's being put on Israel, again, the press reports what Blinken's doing. Share for our audience, because I know our audience is very pro-Israel. What exactly are they threatening the Israelis with? Are they going to withhold some of the military aid that Congress has already authorized, or are they going to take further steps?
Well, from just what's been in the news, the the weapons have been authorized by Congress, the funding, the weapons, and President Biden has chosen to hold them up and use them as leverage for Israel to agree to their terms before they release what Congress has authorized. Yeah, I know Biden wants to rush in and give all this money to Ukraine. And let me tell you, Mark, I was an exchange student for a summer to the Soviet Union back when it was a real thing, and really Marxist. And half of the summer was spent in Ukraine, and I developed a real love for the people there. But when you have a national leader that comes into our House chamber and sits there and basically, in effect, says, yeah, you may be worried about how we're spending your money, but don't worry, we're spending it well. Really? That's what we want to hear? I don't. And you come in there in your sweatshirt, you had hours and hours to put on a suit so you don't breach the rules of the House proceedings. I mean, I was told my first term, somebody had said, oh, you got something white on your back, and it wasn't a joke. And so I took it off the road. The sergeant at arms went running back there. You cannot be on this House floor if you're not wearing a jacket. I'm going, just trying to get this white off. And he said, then get off the floor until you get it off. And then Zelensky comes in a sweatshirt and tells us, just keep sending money. It's all going to be fine. Excuse me? That's not the way good neighbors work together. That's not the way friends work together. But then we throw those billions away. And by the way, of course, now you've got Putin. And I've never been a fan of Putin. I marveled when people said, well, it's just so hard to read Putin. I'm going, no, it isn't. He's a KGB agent. He wants the old Soviet Union back. It's not hard to figure out at all. You have to be a real intellectual to be dunce enough not to figure that out. But, to be putting this kind of pressure on Israel, they're in a battle for their very existence. And then Hezbollah in northern Israel, well, Lebanon, they're firing on them, creating all these fires and having trouble controlling. And then you've got, and what a shock when they released those, they got the release of those 4 hostages. One of them was being held by an Al Jazeera reporter. And even though Al Jazeera released a statement saying, hey, he wasn't part of our group, well, they had his name right there on the website saying he was a reporter with them. And then also I was concerned that they had moved clear down to southern Gaza and gone into Rafah to try to root these folks out. So these hostages were being held in central Gaza. They had passed by there, being assured there's nothing to see here. These are all UN workers, and there were some UN workers right in there with the bad guys. So Israel is really up against the wall for their own defense. And you got Biden assuring Saudi Arabia, look, I know you haven't renewed the petrodollar deal yet. And yes, he knows. Well, he may not know where he is, but people in his administration know that if Saudi Arabia doesn't come back to this agreement to accept dollars for oil, and they start taking the Chinese currency, which it appears they're starting, it's going to be bad for the dollar. Interest rates are going to shoot up. Our debt will shoot up just because we can't afford to pay things back. And in a meeting with a an Allies national leader several years ago, back in the Obama administration. We were talking about national debt. And he knew that, like we know, that most nations measure how much trouble you're in debt wise by your debt to GDP ratio.
Correct.
And the EU says you can't join if you have more than 60% debt to GDP ratio. And this leader said, yeah, where is America right now? Well, we're about 95, 96%. And he was startled. I had no idea, because in the EU, they won't accept less than 60. They have some people a little over. Greece was over, and that's why their economy went to pot. They went bankrupt. So we've been at 119 to 129% debt to GDP under Biden. And so this is really dangerous. And then we turn around and are putting that much pressure on the one democracy in the entire Middle East. Not real smart.
Louie, it's insane. The policy is just crazy. But I tell you one thing, and you're spot on in your analysis. I'm with you 100%. We're going to take a quick minute and a half break. But Louie, when we come back, we're not only going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Ukraine, Russia. We're going to talk about the Marxist expansion in this country, because a lot of people think they're using the Democratic Party. It's both ways, folks. Be back in 90 seconds with Louie Gohmert, folks. See you shortly.
Sounds rolling. All three cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Really brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
And we're back with Congressman Louie Gohmert. Hey, Louie, I got to tell you something. I've seen that General Flynn movie 3 times. And when I tell you the emotion of people coming out of that film, when they watch what this man went through after serving his country, it's literally off the charts. So, General Flynn, again, it's a privilege to work with you. Louie.
Well,
all right.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
General Flynn was going to come in and clean up the intel apparatus because it had gotten so far afield from where it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be protecting us from Marxists and from the radicals in the world, and yet they were coming after people that were just trying to preserve our civilization. And we don't want Marxists in charge. We don't want radical Islamists in charge. We want to have the freedom we have. And with either one of them in charge, that doesn't happen. And, you know, it was Dostoevsky back in the 1800s responding to some idiot named Marx. And he pointed out through his study of all that Marx was proposing that the problem with Marxism is not economic. Well, you and I know that's a problem, but his point was, and he said, the problem with Marxism is atheism. And that is it in a nutshell, because you can't have any other God other than Marxism, communism, progressivism, as the new folks like to say, because it sounds so much nicer. But bottom line, as David Horowitz has pointed out repeatedly, there has been no form of government, no king, emperor, tyrant that has ever killed as many people as communism has, between Stalin and Mao. I mean, so, Hitler was a piker compared to how many people were killed by Stalin and Mao. And when you look at every individual life in the Holocaust, from Hitler, and then you expand that to just how much murder's gone on under these horrible governments, then you begin to understand what Orwell was trying to warn us about. And yet we're
Louie,
headed right into it.
Let me ask you this, Louie, and this is a question that Horowitz posed in his expose. Is it the Marxists using the Democratic Party, or is it the other way around? Because, again, as the article pointed out, and you and I know this, and a lot of our conservative viewers know this is not Bill Clinton's Democratic Party.
No.
It's not even
No.
Barack Obama's Democratic Party. I mean, Louie, this party has shifted so far left. What was up is now down. What's down is up. And it literally, you hear the old saying, it's not my father's Democratic Party. Heck, this wouldn't be my brother's Democratic Party. Who's using who here? Because it looks to me the Marxists are winning this one.
Yeah, the Marxists, but they have combined forces with the radical Islamists to bring down the government. And the Democrats have been willing allies in this effort. And regarding your question, well, the Marxists have used the Democratic Party. The radical Islamists have used the Democratic Party. And it's so amazing because the Democratic Party and the Islamists in their group are out there, marching, rioting, protesting for LGBTQ rights, when they know good and well in their preferred country that just for demanding rights like that, they would be put to death. And so it's all about bringing this country down, whatever it takes, say whatever you take. And that's why the Chinese Communist Party have been supporting so many of these efforts to help destroy our moral clarity in this. You destroy morals. Well, and it goes back to what John Adams said. This Constitution was intended for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. And when you think about it, I know you have, you can't allow a Second Amendment right if you're not going to teach right and wrong to school children. If you're not going to teach that it's not all relative. Well, it's okay for them to rob and kill because they had a tough upbringing. No, there's some absolute rights and wrongs. And if we don't teach those, as the Bill Ayers and others have gone into universities and taught the future teachers that are now teaching the little ones coming up, socialism, Marxism, communism, it's all a good thing. It's just share and share alike. No, it's totalitarian, and what it does to the soul is just unforgivable.
And Louis, you mentioned the Islamic countries. If you're a gay person, now think about it in this country. We allow gay marriage. We allow gay rights. If you're a gay individual in Iran and they find out, you're executed. And Louis, this happens not only in Iran, but in a lot of Muslim countries that have an Islamic leaning towards them. I mean, you cannot be openly anything other than straight, or they'll kill you in these countries.
Well, and that supports what we were talking about, these people using the Democratic Party. And I know that a majority, supposedly according to polls, a majority of Jews in America have supported the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party has been supporting those who are really anti-Semitic, thinking, well, they know we're on their side, this is going to work out well. But then when some of those Democrats have seen all the anti-Semitism breaking out on universities across the country, they're going, wait, this, we weren't for this. No. Well, yeah, you've been helping these people get to a place where they could cause this kind of damage. And I mentioned in my article, just having known David Horowitz for so many years. And by the way, his book, new book, but America Betrayed. It's a short book, but is absolutely. He told me a few days, he was in the hospital at the time. He's out. He's doing okay. But he said, have you read my latest book? And I said, I wasn't sure it was out. He said, yeah, it came out a few days ago. So I got it. He said, I think it's the best thing I've ever written. And I'm telling you, it's the best thing he's ever written. It was extraordinary. But I mentioned in my article a conversation with him years ago. I was going, David, I never really understood. You and Hayden and all these guys were planning the protests and hopeful for riots and things at the 68 Democratic Convention. And I've always wondered about that because they were nominating the most liberal person to that point for president, Hubert Humphrey. Whereas you got Nixon, he was the anti-communist before he went into being vice president. He was heading up a House effort going after communists. And you went after the Democratic Convention. He said, yeah, well, it helped that Humphrey had supported Vietnam War. And I said, yeah, but Nixon had been even more supportive originally. He said, yeah, but our goal was to get young people in the street rioting so that it could foment that final revolution that we were seeking in order to have a Marxist takeover of America. And we figured if Humphrey got elected, since he was a liberal, it might be harder to get some of those young people out in the streets, where if Nixon's elected, we had a lot better chance of getting riots in the street to get us the revolution. Mark, does anything about that sound familiar with today?
Yes, it does. I feel like I'm watching a rerun of 1968 all over again. And Louie, the thing is this, in that article, I didn't realize it, but David, he used to be a communist. I mean, I learned that from that article. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I introduced him years ago to somebody and said, and David used to be a socialist. And David he is more strident as a pro-free enterprise than he was a communist. But he said, Louie, I was a communist. My mommy was a commie. My daddy was a commie. I was a commie. And his mother and father were communists openly back in the 50s with all of the purge going on, and they didn't give in. He said they got quieter about support for communism after Khrushchev brought out the 20 million murders by Stalin. They were a little quieter after that. But his turn from being just a stringent, a powerful communist leader in America began to happen. Well, he saw the Black Panthers. He believed they had killed a female friend of his. But in the talking about pushing for riots, the comment was made that, we need to keep assaulting and going after the police until they kill some of our people. And David was going, wait a minute, but our goal is to get some of our people killed? Yes, David, don't you understand? Once we can get police to kill some of our people, we will win. We'll get the revolution. We'll get the rioting. And that's when he was beginning to wonder, should I be supporting a group that gets my friends killed, And then the more
something's wrong with that.
And really, he has so many examples. He's such a brilliant guy. But he one of his books, he was pointing out, and I hear this, and I know he's still thinking about wishing his father were around to make this point with him. But he said, so I'm shaving myself, and I look at my razor. It's got 5 blades. It's got this cushion around the edge to make it more comfortable. And then I can push a button and it vibrates to get an even closer shave. He said, you could never find one of these in the Soviet Union unless one of the leaders had it. but they would never invent something like that because they're not about rewarding improvement like we have been in the past here in the United States.
Well,
Isn't
you
that
mentioned,
simple, but a great
oh,
example?
economics has a funny way about working, and it's fairly consistent, Louis. I mean, what made sense
Yeah.
economically in capitalism back in the 30s and 40s makes sense today in the 2020s. It's just amazing how supply and demand really works. Prices are mechanisms that affect
It
supply and
does.
demand. Unless
Yep.
it's the U.S. government, of course, different story. All right, you mentioned 1968 and the conventions. I want to turn to that for a minute here, and I want to tie in what you just said about what Horowitz said about having some of his people killed. 2 points. Look at Hamas. Hamas has no problem with their people being killed. And you heard the leadership come out the other day. I think you were probably still in Israel when the news story came out, where they effectively didn't have a problem with their own citizens being killed. We fast forward here to the convention coming up, Democratic Convention in Chicago, 1968, 2024. We've got Humphrey and Nixon, we have Biden and Trump. Milwaukee, Chicago. Listen, these conventions are not very far apart, Louis. You know it as well as I know it. I mean, is 2024 going to make 1968 look like a walk in the park?
I think it will, but you know, the Biden administration and the leftists, they keep talking about how horrible it could be if Trump got reelected, and they talk about, we need to be scared. Let me tell you, we've seen election deniers every time a Republican's been elected president the last 25 years. And I'm telling you, the Marxists are so close to taking over everything. They played the Democrats so well. In fact, they are Democrats now. Not all Democrats are Marxists, but anyway, we got to get ready. It's going to, the violence from the Marxists, from the Democrats, from the Islamics. If Trump is declared the winner, I think he'll win. But if he's declared the winner, we got to be ready and you've got millions of people come in here that could be activated. And of course, they're not, all those that came in illegally are not agents of a foreign country. But we know the Chinese were pushing people in here, military age. We know, heck, years ago, Comey had said, yeah, we probably got cells in every big city. Well, you don't think they'll be activated to help foment that big revolution? So, one, we've got to get Republicans elected to majorities in the House and Senate, get President Trump elected, and then we got a clean house like Trump and Flynn had hoped to do before they got completely derailed by really the criminal plots to bring down his administration within the DOJ. And by the way, it's not just the DOJ and Intel. DOD, I tried to help Adam Lovinger. He was a civilian employee with the Pentagon, and he found his job was to make sure they got all the bang for the bucks they were spending. And he found these $200,000-$300,000 payments going to a guy in London. And he wrote a couple of articles that were going, we didn't get all, they had spent over $1 million on this guy. And so he passed it up. We're not getting anything for what we're giving to this professor in London named Stephen Halper. That name should ring a bell, Mark.
Oh, yeah. Rings a bell.
And so the higher ups, they got him fired. And he's been trying to get his job back for all these years. That was during the Obama administration. But yeah, the DOD was paying Stephen Halper, the professor that was trying to set up Papadopoulos, Carter Page, trying to get something to get a warrant in order to spy on the Trump campaign and on Trump. And that was DOD paying for that.
Louis, hold that thought. We're going to take a 1.5 minute break, but when we come back, I want to get Louis's impression on where we are, Trump, Biden, the election, swing states. We got the election covered for you. Be back in 90 seconds.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold.
Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
I don't know about you, but I have to have that cup of coffee in the morning. And Kingdom Cup is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, and it is organic. It's got this flavor that is delicious. You don't even have to put cream or sweetener in it.
Why did we go with the bean form, the whole bean? Because ultimately the powder form is the one that gathers the most moisture. And that means the more potential mold development. This is actually organic, mold-free, certified. That's important because ultimately people drink coffee. It's cultural. And so we tried to meet the culture where it is and create a healthy alternative.
Make the healthy choice for you and your family. Try mold-free, pesticide-free, and it's organic. Delicious Kingdom Cup coffee. And it's available now at the Patriot TV store. Go to patriot.tv and click on store. You'll find Kingdom Cup coffee in the health and wellness section. Order Kingdom Cup coffee at the Patriot TV store now.
And we're back with legendary Congressman Louie Gohmert. All right, Louie. I knew you'd like that one. That's a good one. All right, 7 swing states. Everybody's seen the polling. Trump gets, quote, convicted, 34 counts. His poll numbers haven't moved literally a point, neither have Biden's. This race is almost etched in stone for the 92%. All right, Trump, those 7 swing states, in 4 of them, he's up beyond the margin of error. Louie, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan within a point. Pennsylvania's up 2.5. Looking behind the numbers, how do you see this race right now based upon current polling?
Well, based on the last couple of elections, it appears clear, like President Trump has been saying, he's got to win big, too big to lose to cheating, because they're not giving up and they're going to be cheating. And all this stuff about all fraud in the 2020 election has been debunked. No, the debunking has been debunked, and that's been established. So I am concerned that a 1 to 1.5% is not enough for Trump to be declared the winner. We got to get people out, and these people, the folks that I've heard saying, well, I don't even care about voting. I don't care about either candidate. This is your children's future. You're going to deny them the freedom that you've had. Fortunately, I hear people that used to say, I don't care what the government does as long as they stay out of my business. Many of them have realized if you don't care what the government does, they're going to be all in your business, and they are. So this is critically important. I do think, like the polling is showing, that Trump is a good bit ahead in a number of places. And what we've seen from prior polls, if it shows him a little bit ahead, he's probably way ahead. So it's just, we have got to have people coming out and volunteering to be poll watchers. We got to have lawyers ready to grab their affidavits when they see cheating, get those signed and get them submitted, get an injunction immediately to stop the cheating, stop the fraud. But as some said, we can't let them go into the day of voting hundreds of thousands of votes ahead. And does cheating happen? Yes, it's happened for years. You probably heard the old story. Lyndon Johnson told one time, relayed by, I think it was David Brinkley. Tom Brokaw says, why don't you tell people, that story Johnson told? He said, well, back in those days before Watergate, the press and the president were good friends, and we'd sit around and we'd have a lot of visits. And Johnson was down in the press room. We were watching midterm election results. He had his boots up on one of the reporters' desks and scratching his belly with that one hand, drinking a beer with others. Yeah, I remember back when I was running, and we had a county that my campaign manager and I were out. We were concerned about it. We were going through the cemetery, writing down names of people that needed to vote the next day. And we came to one gravestone, and it had so much moss and stuff on it, you couldn't read it. My campaign manager says, "Come on, let's move on to the next one." And he said, I grabbed him and I said, "No, sir. This man has every bit as much right to vote as anybody else in this cemetery." And, the truth is, Mark, the one group, I mean, Trump is making great inroads. Black voters are going, wait a minute, we're much worse off with these guys. And like Trump had said, what do you got to lose? Well, now they've seen they have a lot to lose if he's not president. So he's making inroads with Hispanics, with blacks, and with all groups, except for one group we haven't broken into, and that's the dead voters. The dead voters, once people die, they just are going to vote Democrat, and we've had a lot of trouble breaking into that group.
It's tough to win that argument, isn't it, Louie? Because the dead voters have been voting. They've been voting Democrat their whole life, and what changes there? All right, listen. Here's a question. All right, time frame, and here's a question everybody's asking us here at Patriot TV. All right, Trump and Biden are going to have their debate on June 27th. Okay, let's play a sort of a what-if scenario because, Louie, it's obvious. I mean, you're close to D.C. You've been there. You've seen the people. Biden is in serious decline. I hate saying that because he's your president as well as mine. I never like to see a U.S. president declining, but the man is declining. And yet the Democratic Party is putting this man up to be their nominee. It's almost sick what they're doing. Having said that, if he comes out and has a poor debate performance against President Trump on the 27th, you and I know there will be a lot of talk. Do we have time to replace this man? Louie, you've been around politics. Handicap it. Bad debate, good debate. Will Joe Biden continue to be the Democratic nominee if he comes out of this debate in poor shape?
I think he will for a while, but because there's a lot of time between the first debate and the election. But it's going to be really difficult, according to the rules, for the Democrats to all of a sudden replace a guy that the White House is saying he's totally in charge. He's on top of his game. Everything's fine. Don't look behind the curtain. Everything's fine. It's going to be tough for them to replace him absent some, major event. So they're in a bind, and I know they're debating behind the scenes, could we afford to try to ease him out before the convention and just say he's not competent? Whereas, we can't be sure that whomever we replace him with is going to do as well as Biden is in the polls. If we got somebody that would be within a point or two of Trump if we switched them out now. So that debate is ongoing. And I hear all of the claims, they're going to put Michelle Obama in at some point as vice president or president. It will be difficult to do. I think most of them realize we're just going to have to ride this train. And remember, we went through this before in 2020 because he was, a bit dim-witted at the time. But they got him pumped up with whatever they filled him full of, and he made it through the debate and made it through the State of the Union address. So maybe we can do that one more time. If we can just get him to win the election with all the votes that we'll bring in from dead people and others, then we can worry about replacing him afterwards. So I think
his go ahead, Louie. No, I was just saying
No,
his approval rating, as you've seen, 38, 39%. I mean,
yeah,
these are numbers worse than Jimmy Carter. And his
yeah.
esteemed vice president, Kamala Harris, she's even worse than him. By the way, folks, Kamala Harris, just a little reminder, when she ran in the primary, she got literally 0 votes. She did not even make it through the Iowa caucuses, folks. And her approval rating now is somewhere in the mid 30s. Louie, I don't think she's a viable alternative under any circumstance.
No, I don't think she is either. And that's what Democrats are saying. And there was a lot of talk about this, Mark, back when he picked her, that like a lot of times presidents go, well, I want a vice president that is good enough to do the job, but is not somebody that they'll want to replace me with, so that you don't rush to get rid of the president so the vice president can take over. As used to be said, like Al Gore was kind of a life insurance policy because people didn't want him. Therefore, they just have to stick with the president.
Well, you gave me a good lead in here. Louie, we're going to take just a very short break. And then when I come back, I want to talk about Trump, where he is right now, who's his vice president, and what's going to happen if they, God forbid, put him in jail. Be back in 1 minute.
Well, look no further. Here at God Country & Kin, we've got you covered from head to toe, from shoulder to shoulder, and everything in between. Introducing our brand new Patriotic Collection, designed to display your patriotic spirit with a stylish look that's sure to turn heads. And the best part is, you don't have to break the bank to be your best you. Why wait? Visit us online or in-store today and elevate your style with God Country & Kin. God Country & Kin, where patriotism meets style. Shop now. Visit the Patriot TV store and look for the God Country Kin banner to find the perfect outfit, shirt, accessory, or maybe a great hat. You can totally see yourself rocking this hat. I know you can. And check out all the great stuff we've got to show your patriotism at patriot.tv.store. Click that link above that says store and join me there at the Patriot TV store.
And I'm back with Louie Gohmert. All right, Louie, right before the break, I asked you, Trump is going to be sentenced on July 11th. The convention is a couple days after that. Handicap the sentencing for him. I know how unfair it is, but we literally could go into a Republican convention having our nominee either in jail, probation, house arrest. What do you make of this?
Well, this has got to be resolved by the Supreme Court, and this is one of those extremely rare occasions where the harm will be irreparable if that occurs. I mean, I would hope they could get a streamline to the Supreme Court. They should be able to. I think legally they could, because there is no other remedy that is adequate. And if the Supreme Court sits this out, as they did some of the disputes back in 2020, 2021. And look, I understand, I had death threats as a judge. I know what it's like, and it's miserable. But as I've said before, when the entities that are created within the government to resolve disputes amicably and civilly refuse to do their job, then historically it means there's going to be violence. And some tried to say, oh, you're advocating violence. No, I'm a historian. I know that's what happens. But for conservatives, I would say we absolutely cannot let the left get us involved in any violence, because the Biden administration will use it to declare martial law, create all kinds of problems, put more people in jail. We cannot let them suck us into violence, but we have got to stand up. We've got to be out making sure everybody that can possibly vote for Trump does so. We can't sit back. This is our big shot. But in order, like to answer your question about him being put in jail, for heaven's sakes, Bannon and Navarro should never have been put in jail. No, Bannon's not reported yet, but they were held in contempt by a committee that was violating all the a lot of the rules, and that nobody should have been held in contempt. And I hope that at some point Steve and Peter will be able to sue for malicious prosecution, going back to the J6 unlawfully formed committee. But it is critical, and the Supreme Court their guidance needs to be sought, and an opinion saying this is not a legitimate prosecution. You can't sandbag somebody and even through the finding of the jury not be able to tell a guy you're found guilty of this federal offense, and that allows us to bootstrap this up into a felony in the state law. You can't do that. That is Kafka, The Trial.
Yeah.
If you ever had to read that horrible book, I mean, that you don't advise somebody of what they're charged with. You don't even let them know after they're convicted. That's where Trump is on this thing. And so I have no confidence that the New York courts will do the right thing, because they've all been susceptible to political influence. But the Supreme Court has got to do the right thing and say, you can't put somebody in jail for charges you don't make clear what they are, and they're not your right to prosecute anyway. Federal government, the DOJ should have stepped in, but they're so sold out to the left, they're not helpful in the way of justice. So that's where we are, Mark. It's got to be the Supreme Court, but they've got to get that expedited appeal straight up there.
And Louie, didn't the federal government declined to prosecute Trump? The Department of Justice said there's no case here.
Right.
Unbelievable.
And so, yeah. So the DOJ, if it were Biden that were being prosecuted, the DOJ would have gone in and said, New York courts, you have no authority to prosecute this. This is a federal statute, and the federal law, the federal precedents, Supreme Court precedents make clear a state court cannot, do the federal court's job. So that's the way it should be. Of course, Supreme Court said that in a case where they shouldn't have, when it came to enforcing immigration laws Arizona was trying to do. That was a huge mistake. States and local governments have helped enforcing immigration laws since the beginning. They're very
Louie,
important.
You're in Texas, one of the epicenters of that. I got about 2-3 minutes, and I'm going to let you close it out. But the ACLU sues the federal government over Biden's new immigration policy. This is one of those things where I say, what's up is down, what's down is up. Louie, 2 minutes left. Close it out on that, because you're in, Texas, Arizona. You're right in the heart of it there. What the American people think there's two issues important: the economy and the border. Close it out for us, Louie. You got 2 minutes.
Well, the ACLU has taken that action, but I can't help but wonder, based on past history, if the ACLU's not, and the Biden administration, doing a wink, wink. Look, the Biden administration, behind the scenes, we're saying you don't have to worry. We just get elected, then let us get by with this, and we get elected, and it's back to way we let everybody in, criminals, terrorists. It's not going to be a problem. But the ACLU kind of got out ahead of the Democratic Party on this. But they got to understand the ACLU action will mean the end of America if they succeed. And actually, Biden is announcing he's going to try to do his job, but there's no intention to do it whatsoever.
No, and they've been telling us for months that the border was secure, everything is okay. I mean, Louie, what's it like in Texas? I mean, let me ask you rhetorically. I know the answer, but for our viewers, since Biden decided to allow 2,500 people a day into the country before enforcing his new policy, has there been any change at all along the border?
Well, there has been with some of the efforts, the concertina wire and barriers that have been put down on the Texas border. Well, what it means is the cartels have moved down and they're bringing more in through California than they were before. But but the federal government's efforts have not impeded anything at all in the way of new influx of illegal immigrants. So it's just as dangerous as it was before. They're still pouring in, and there will be consequences for this for America. Maybe not for the Biden administration, but for America. You cannot sustain a country doing that kind of thing.
Well, when you bring up 8-9 million people, possibly 10, since Joe Biden's been inaugurated, crime certainly hasn't gone down. We have laws in this country that say, yeah, you got to house them, you got to give them cell phones, you got to feed them, you got to educate the kids. It's putting a tremendous strain on our entire system, Louie, which is, again, why we're running $2 trillion deficits. One reason for that. Again, what do you see?
Well,
what do you, as a result
well,
of this?
let me just say on the estimates of 7, 8, 9, 10 million people coming in, I've spent so much time in recent years down on the border. And in talking, there were a few of us down there talking with the head of Customs and Border Patrol, the Border Patrol guys down on Texas border, and he was the head of that area. And I said, look, we know the reports of how many you in process. We know the reports that you make of gotaways, people that they actually saw, and they can account these were real people. They got past us. But I said, but from the evidence, you see where people are coming in. You didn't get those people. You didn't see them. You didn't in-process them. You have any kind of guesstimate as to, because that's what it is, the people he said, we're afraid that between the ones we in-process, the gotaways, compared to the ones we don't ever see, that we may just be getting half of them. So when you say 8, 9, 10 million, we don't know how many have come in because the border is so porous. They're just pouring in. And I've seen it myself down there on the Rio Grande where they have thermo, they've got in the Texas boats that are running up and down the river, and nobody was crossing while those boats were on the river, the Texas boats. But we had the balloons that the federal government was using, and we would report, or the Texas Department of Public Safety, they would designate the spot. There's 17 people right there. It doesn't look like they're carrying much of anything. These are people that are going to come in illegally. They're waiting for a chance to cross. It looks like, here they think they're hiding, but we see them. It looks like they're carrying big bundles. They're probably bringing a bunch of drugs. And so we went down and parked on this one occasion, and finally the immigration radioed and said, look, nobody's going to make a move until as long as you're sitting out there and they know you hadn't gone back to port. So why don't you return, and we'll be able to catch these people. And so they're looking at me, and I said, whatever you think, it's y'all making the calls. So they returned back to the dock, and shortly thereafter, they said all the groups that you reported seeing, they have come across, and we're now in processing, except those small groups that looked like they were carrying drugs. We saw them coming across, but they disappeared in brush somewhere. We never were able to catch them.
Wow.
That's the kind of stuff that's going on. And, I've seen it myself. Sad
Louie,
stuff. But, yeah.
No, I was going to say, Louie, I mean, I cannot thank you enough for relaying these stories from Israel to what's happening in Congress to what's happening on the border, the economy. It's just been an absolute pleasure having you on Patriot TV. On behalf of the entire network, I really want to thank you for taking your valuable time, spending it with us. And Louie, I had so much fun interviewing you. I hope you come back because you're the type of person. Our audience at Patriot TV loves Louie Gohmert. I can tell you that. I've seen the reviews, the comments. So, Louie, thank you so much for joining me on Patriot
Mark.
TV this evening.
Great being with you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. All right, so that's it for this weekend show, folks. We'll be back next week. Patriot TV, stick with us. You're going to hear the truth, and we're growing and growing, and we have a great show host lineup coming up for you. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.